Welcome to our Next Big Thing podcast series. Today, I'm joined by Associate Professor Lynette Cheah, who focuses on engineering systems and design at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. And, you're currently leading the Sustainable Urban Mobility Research Group as well. So, Professor Cheah, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, I'm very happy to.
Thank you. So, your research focuses on as well developing, data-driven models and tools which look at, how we can reduce environmental impacts, of transportation and that sort of thing. So, I'm curious to know what exactly, about that specific field made you want to get started in it, made you want to pursue it further.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on the podcast. So I actually started out with an interest in environmental engineering, so very keen on sustainability, environmental impacts. So thinking about how we can clean up our industrial processes. It's actually quite interesting. I ended up working with a mechanical engineering professor when I was doing my PhD, and then he suggested I look into sustainable transportation. So that's how I ended up looking at transport systems and examining the impact of how we move people and goods around. It might help for me to explain engineering systems, which is
Sure.
the department that I'm part of. So engineering systems looks at complex technical systems with an eye on the interactions between the different subcomponents and how different users interact with it. So while there's a focus on the use of technology in these systems, we're also concerned with the social aspects, the economic aspects. So other than the transport system, other examples of systems include supply chains, healthcare delivery, and energy systems. So we use simulations and models to better understand how to design, manage, and operate these systems.
And what do you think, for those who might not be familiar with your field in particular, what do you think are the misconceptions about perhaps sustainable development in bigger urban areas, for example? What do you think are some of the misconceptions?
Right. So when we're trying to achieve sustainable urban mobility, I think many people might think about, oh, greener cars, like electric cars, right? So there's a lot of focus on electric mobility now. So EVs are indeed cleaner than conventional cars, right, that use internal combustion engines and run on fossil fuels. But when it comes to big cities, where a lot of people live, the main solution is not really cleaner cars for private use, because this helps with incremental efficiency gains. But to get like these transformative results, we need to really manage travel demand. So we need good quality mass transit or public transport, and we have to make this transit options attractive and viable for urban environments. So this would be good for the environment, good for creating more livable spaces. In a city environment, transit actually works out really well because it can thrive with the sufficient density of people and activities in the city. Other than public transport, we can also promote non-motorized modes like walking and cycling in cities.
Right.
So this is also a good idea and much cleaner and good for human health.
And you mentioned, as part of some of the misconceptions, you mentioned, to make some of these solutions attractive. What can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so we have to make it, I guess when you're comparing taking public transport versus driving a private car, we have to make it, clean, efficient, affordable. So these are sort of the goals that we should have to promote the use of public transport.
And so just to touch on again, some of your research focuses again on sustainable urban mobility and some of the tools that we can use to reduce environmental impacts. What do you think are some things that bigger cities, specifically overpopulated cities, perhaps, I'm thinking of like New York City or, overpopulated cities can start doing to become more sustainable? Because I know, your research is focused on Singapore itself. So by looking at Singapore, what can other cities do to start becoming more sustainable?
Yeah. I think like I mentioned earlier, the emphasis on providing alternatives to private car use is always a good idea for cities. I think as cities develop, they can sort of choose different pathways, pursuing like one that is more dependent on the automobile, which wouldn't be as ideal, versus one where we have all these alternative modes that are hopefully as attractive as taking a private car. If we can promote shared rides, is also better than again promoting car ownership and then using that primarily for only a single driver, for example. Yeah.
And what do you think are some of the challenges when it comes to trying to implement sustainable solutions in bigger cities? What do you think are some of the challenges going forward?
Yeah. I think it's always a challenge trying to balance this trade-off between we can pursue a sustainable like a mobility path versus all the different growth needs that are happening. So in cities, we're always competing for space. Usually, that's the main constraint, right? We need land for buildings, for homes, for industry, and then also for roadways, right? So I think it has to be very deliberate at the beginning to think about offering public transport systems, networks, and how to make it again more efficient and attractive.
Mm.
Mm.
And how do you when we talk about something like becoming sustainable, like you said in the beginning, is like people think of electric cars or like walking more or biking more or something like that.
Mhm.
How do you what how, are there ways that people can become more interested in a topic like this, as broad as this? Like, how can people become more interested in finding solutions to become
Mhm.
sustainable?
Mhm. Yeah, I think as individuals, we are often making daily transport decisions, right? Like what mode should I take? How should I get to where I need to be? And what trip should I make? I think it even starts at the very beginning, like, oh, should I even make the trip at all? So like right now we're having a podcast interaction virtually, and it seems like with the pandemic situation, a lot of interactions have been made virtual, more virtual, right? We go to school online, we can work from home, and so on. So managing demand is a key thing. So we can all make these individual choices where possible. If it's possible to avoid making a trip, we can consider that. Other individual decisions can be things like sharing a ride with others instead of again driving alone in a private car, which is really a luxury to have. But
Right.
in cities, if everyone does that, then it makes it really difficult to manage the congestion that comes alongside with that. Um, yeah, so again, taking public transport options. If you can bike, I think that's actually a very attractive mode, right? If there's a safe space for bicycles to be within the city, I think that can be a very good mode to promote. Um, Living in a city where you have all these amenities nearby also suggests that you don't have to get too far in order to
Right.
find what you're looking for, right? To meet a friend or to pick up your groceries, things like that. So I think individual choices are there. And then from the authority side, right? So when city planners and urban planners think about sustainable urban mobility, this ties up very closely with land uses and how we plan spaces and where to site the city centers and the core and also in the suburbs, right? How do we plan it such that, again, people have access to what they're looking for without needing to travel across the city? So all that has to be thought of carefully.
And you're talking about planning and what needs to be done in the future. Where do you think we're headed in terms of becoming more sustainable in the future? I know every city has its own regulations in terms of how can we what solutions we can use depending on transportation, etc. So where do you think we're headed in terms of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a lot of positive movement actually. Many cities do want to be greener, do want to have offer like green spaces for the residents and are actively trying to promote it. I think the struggle is always again this trade-off, right, between balancing growth and these competing needs. But I'm very encouraged. I see many cities that are being very deliberate actually, promote public transport and so on, sometimes making it very affordable. So some cities have offered free public transport in some places in order to promote that. So I think this is very positive, and I'm very encouraged to see these movements.
And do you think there's more to be done? I know there's, like you said, there's different cities doing different things to implement sustainability, but Do you think there's more to be done?
There's always work, so it's a very hot topic, and I always welcome people to come join us, to look at research or technologies or even solutions, right? So if there are ideas to develop, I mean, I've been teaching urban transportation to the students in my university for the past few years, and every year I have to refresh the material because there's always new
Right.
companies that coming into the space, new technologies that have an impact on the way we share our rides or stay up to date on like the state of the transport system.
Mm.
So it's always it's expanding field. So definitely there's a lot more work and it's quite exciting actually as a field to get into.
Hmm. And what do you say for people that or for students or younger people that want to become a part of this sustainable solutions to
Mm-hmm.
improve our world and to make it a better place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there are so many disciplines that are involved. I mean, we need engineers, we need entrepreneurs, we need behavioral scientists, social science sciences, policymakers, So it's definitely a very interdisciplinary topic, given how transportation at its core is fundamentally about human behavior and how humans want to move around, right? So I think there's many ways to contribute. I mean, depending on your discipline and interest, we can always find a way to have an impact in the cities that you belong to.
Hmm. And do you feel like there's more I would think so too, but do you think there's more interest in like the younger population that wants to be a part of what can we do to become more sustainable? Like do you see that the younger population being more interested in this?
Yes, yes, definitely. I would say more recently too. There's definitely more. I detect or sense more interest among the young, among the students to like, hey, what can we do? How
Mhm.
can I use my skills towards making my environment and my community greener and so on. So it's very good. It's very encouraging. At the same time, sometimes it's a bit of a step, right? Sometimes people commit to say, I'm willing to be more environmentally conscious. But
Right.
converting that statement to actions is sometimes that big step. So you need
Hmm.
to first be aware of the different ways and then maybe find out a little bit more about it and then actually doing it, executing and maintaining it, maintaining
Hmm.
those commitments, right? If I
Right.
commit to avoiding taking a taxi and taking the bus instead and so continuing to do that would be good.
Right. And you said, recently, you just mentioned, recently the younger generation has sort of grasped onto this idea of like of again sustainability. Where do you think that shift? Where do you think that shift happened? In terms of like this now younger generation wants to be a part of like making
Yeah.
making better choices.
Right, right. I think it happened gradually, but maybe in recent times a little bit more rapidly. I think there's more media attention to it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been putting out many reports, and that could also have influenced maybe some people to start thinking about it more carefully and motivating it. I think global events also often spark changes when we observe some of the changes in the weather conditions or some of the issues that are a result of the way we interact with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also inspires action.
Hmm. And what are you currently working on? I know you said you've been teaching, but like what is there any upcoming projects that you're currently working on right now?
Yeah, we've been looking at a project recently on urban freight transportation. So this is the
Okay.
movement of goods in cities. So again, with the pandemic, we see a lot of interest in e-commerce, a lot of people ordering things online, and this results in a lot of home deliveries.
Hmm.
And as a result of that, there's sometimes some congestion also resulting from the delivery trucks or delivery vans moving around the city. So we've been investigating this a little bit more and also looking at solutions like cleaner vehicle modes that can replace those diesel trucks,
Right.
or operations wise, how can we consolidate some of these trips? So yeah, we've been investigating this a bit more.
Well, I just wanna wish you luck with everything that you're continuing to do. I know like I'm interested in this and I hope our listeners can learn more from this too. But Professor, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much, and have a
All right.
great day. I really appreciate it.